Hello, everybody. This is your host, Nation, NW Jordan here, and today we're going to be talking about Revit versus CAD. Which one's better? Which one do you need? Let's get into it. All right, we'll be going over this article here by Starchitect Alpha. It's Revit versus CAD. So we're going to see how much of this we're going to get into. There's 72 comments on this thread, and the question is, how is there even a debate about which is better, Revit versus CAD? So, more of a statement. But let's get into what Starchitect has to say. Okay, listen up, Mr. 35 to 45-year-old PM who hates on Revit daily. I used to buy into the argument that Revit probably ended up taking as much time as CAD because you ended up doing more with it. But after working with Revit for a year and then going back and starting a CD packet with CAD because one of our PMs refuses to learn Revit because he thinks it's a waste of time, I couldn't believe how incredibly useless and outdated this program is. I mean, the obvious ones first of drawing a floor plan. So he's saying, the obvious ones first is drawing a floor plan, elevations, sections separately, but then getting to the design changes and spending double these, checking the lines and make sure they're lined up. So he's complaining that CAD, you have to double back and it doesn't update per view like Revit does. More time going back and making sure that everything lines up. Then, of course, actual sheet setup consisting of creating a myriad of random files that's linked together. And then, of course, the dreaded scale change of a viewport that's already been annotated. That's not good either. That alone wasted me 2 hours changing a fully noted and annotated shopping mall site plan to a different scale would have been 3 seconds in Revit. And thank God we didn't have the extremely dreaded, can we flip the floor plan at 2 days? But in Revit, yep, there's a button for that. Seriously. This program is terrible. Talking about CAD. Not to mention, you need to be a quasi-computer programmer with knowledge of random command line tests to fix random bugs in the software that's been updated sporadically since Windows 3.0. Stop being lazy and learn Revit. It's better. Trust me. Yeah, I totally agree with you on there. The one thing that I did not like when working in CAD was that as you change one view, one sheet, one viewport, the other views do not automatically update. In Revit, this is a lifesaver. You get all your general and basic 3D modeling out of the way. This way, all your basic detail line work is complete. All your front, side, rear elevations automatically update when you update the model, as well as being like a one-to-one rendering update as you go through the CDs and add renders. And it's good for marketing as well. Okay, we have a comment here by Non Sequitur, and he says, I use both daily and complain about them equally. Main complaint about Revit BIM is that it makes ignorant grads think they have a know-it-all mentality when it comes to putting together buildings, because of there's a button for that mentality. If you knew how to put together a cohesive building set, then you should be efficient whatever tool you use. Donna chimes in and says, as someone who uses CAD poorly and Revit not at all, I'm going to borrow Miles' favorite GIF here. And she posts a gazelle eating some popcorn. Non Sequitur hops back in and says, Donna, I only entertain the CAD versus BIM discussion over a pint of Guinness, and only if there is a promise of more Guinness to follow. I'm by far the most advanced software-wise of my fellow licensed architect friends, and the above points have been made on occasion. I've found a great deal of frustration in the 35 to 45-year-old project manager department comes from kids touting a new revolution. It's not that simple, but whatever else can you expect from someone who only knows the basics of the software? A software is just a tool like any other. Just don't get caught up in thinking that there are a few presses of a button to make one an architect. I totally agree, and I've had similar issue. I don't agree where you say earlier that you should be able to just use whatever tool that you have. I mean, that's ideal, of course, but you want to use the tool that you're most good with. If you're a carpenter, you want to make sure you have a good solid hammer and not use a ancient caveman club, or at least that's the way I see it. And in this case, CAD is that ancient fossil, and Revit is that new, more gorgeous alternative. Now, I'm not trying to paint Revit here as the perfect end-all be-all, because it's not. You'll quickly notice that once you dive into Revit further, that it's really front-loaded, in that you'll be spending a lot of time up front building these 3D models so that all the parts and pieces, all the sheets, all the details, all the views can properly correspond with one another. And then on top of that, you have to decide how much 3D work do you need versus how much 2D work. So let's say you have a project to where you need to have 80% of the 3D work done to produce approximately 50 to 65% of all line work for your construction documents. Then you'll know the ratio and the amount of time you need to dedicate to the 3D model versus the cleanup of the views. And if it's all put together nice, it should be one cohesive entity. Kurt Krim chimes in with a comment here. He says, of course, realizing that framing in that section wasn't actually lined up completely due to human error. He's talking about CAD, and now if something's not lined up, then that's just horrible. He said, this is my favorite part. The assumption is that a Revit eliminates human error, and it does not. Trust me. If you know AutoCAD, you could have reduced the human error by not screwing it up in the first place, creating a myriad of random files that link together. You mean like families learn AutoCAD, then you can set up the drawings better to start with. Also, your PM probably doesn't give a 2 cents about the 2 hours of time you wasted. The most valuable asset any firm has, and their biggest cost, is their people. Ultimately, it's the people that produce the product, and it's the people's work that will decide the profit or loss of the firm, as well as the reputation of the firm. You'll notice when you start worrying more about computer than people, you'll end up with a pretty shitty firm. Yeah. That's why you have to balance your technology with your human resources. A lot of firms, a lot of companies think that people are expendable, that people aren't their greatest asset, when people are. Everyone sometimes struggle in their profession, in their life, but that doesn't automatically mean they should be fired. I've heard a good comparison to treating employees like children, not in a demeaning sense, but in a childlike sense of, if your child messes up, you correct your child, you help make sure your child doesn't make that same mistake again. You put all the safety measures and all the right things in place so they can have a great life. And I like to think that that is ultimately the better way, of course. We have Sneaky Pete saying, understanding the process of architecture makes fresh grads into better architects. Understanding the process of software makes crusty veterans into better architects. Okay, let's read that one more time. Understanding the process of architecture makes fresh grads into better architects. Understanding the process of software makes crusty veterans into better architects. Interesting. We have it's a Senator or Senior John Blutarski. It's SEN John Blutarski. And he says Revit is better for setting up drawings because once things are modeled, you instantly have something to start from while detailing. This is what I mentioned earlier. If you spend, your beginning time knocking out that 80% of that 3D model, then 60 to 70% of your 2D work is already complete. He continues on saying Revit is lousy because we have wait a second here. He says, have you ever tried snapping a leader, making a generic legend, or just about anything involving text? Yeah, text for some reason is very, very, very weird in Revit. He says, I shouldn't have to trick the program into making a legend by making a sprinkler riser legend and changing the text. This is idiotic. Heck, you can't really even copy text into a drawing. And heaven forbid the program actually move all your details around, then it'll shift in the section cut. AutoCAD is a coordination nightmare at times. Revit alleviates some of that. Okay, so basically, this is in regard to how no things are perfect. Not Revit. I mean, Revit is great at making your renders, great at making your floor plans, elevations, your schedules, your details, your title blocks, your general spec, your cover sheet, your abbreviations, and all the other fine bits and pieces. But remember that Revit does not eliminate human error, and there are some things in the program that you have to trick it to make it work appropriately. We shouldn't have to do this, but at the same time, this Revit, even with its problems, is still better than CAD. Sneaky Pete comments again saying, at a risk of sounding like a Revit apologist, details moving automatically is a horrible idea. When one moves a section cut, one needs to ensure that the detail is correct manually. The old CAD method of just leaving the detail alone without checking it is very dangerous and leads to RFIs at best. Yeah, I totally agree there. This happens when you're inputting in some of your annotation, whether this is in the viewport or on the sheet. Some things don't always line up. Like Revit had this weird thing to where you can't always type in a viewport, so you end up typing on the sheet. But if you move that section cut, then your details and your annotations are no longer correct. Another user, Gruen, says, my 2 cents is that CAD is great for people who understand how drawing and construction really work. I love it for small projects, additions, and simple interior projects. Revit really shines for new ground-up construction and large additions. Not so hot for projects that are primarily 2D anyways, such as interior projects. Yes, it can work for these projects, I know. Also, continuing on, he says, my workflow in Revit is to avoid detailing at all until the last days of the project when everything is set in stone. Yes, I'll do the detail cuts and set up the sheets and even hand sketch the critical elements of the details, but I won't commit to them until I know the building is tight. I hate seeing details get screwed when plan making changes. He says, I generally work this way anyway. I try to set up the design in stone as early as possible. It's a pain to make last minute design changes in CAD or Revit. Definitely. I've had experiences to where it is faster to crank out an as-built, a quick tenant renovation CD set in CAD versus Revit, but at the same time, Revit is better for new and fresh construction. Donna says, I agree with Sneaky Pete. I graduated into a firm that barely used CAD, and we learned it all over the next 8 years. So I do understand how understanding how the tools work can change how you approach the work. I know just enough about Revit to feel confident that it's an entirely different way of thinking about how to document a building, which means the design process in a firm is going to be very different too. Yeah. You see, the thing that is different and people have a hard time wrapping their head around is that Revit, you have to think three-dimensionally and 2D when it comes to CAD. So once more, Revit is the 3D based mentality. CAD is the flat 2D planar creation. 2D for CAD, 3D for Revit. Let's see if we can see a few more here. This is Starchitect's alpha thread. So let's see if we can continue this commentary. Starchitect Alpha says, use pick lines in the detail view to block out your detail. Copy into a drafting view. Never worry about shifting details again. I love the comment, remove human error. Okay, cool. I'll get right on removing all human error from projects. Why didn't I think of that before? I was purely saying the program catches a lot of things that people miss. Even seasoned architects can't tell you how many times a seasoned architect will be like, this section is wrong, and then you show them that or what is actually happening, and then they freak out because they didn't realize it and fix things. With CAD, your hood vent would show up on site and be sticking into plumbing. Good luck telling your client why you need another mechanical permit with a wait time of a few months in a major city. And 2 hours is a big deal if you promise something end of day to a new client with potential additional work and you send it an hour late instead of an hour early. Yeah, those have to be watched very carefully. I mean, even though time isn't the end all be all, time is still how a lot of offices are billing their work. I mean, there is a good amount that does flat rate billing, but overall, we just have to keep the lines of communication clear, expectations managed. We don't want to do last minute design changes. And overall, we need to know what program is good for what issue. Now, I think we're pretty much complete here. I'm not seeing anything too important further on I go. It looks like we pretty much hit all the major topics here. So, if I were to summarize this cast and video, I'd say that you really need to know your program, whether this is Revit, CAD, if you're using an Adobe program, whether you're using a PDF, whatever program you're using to help you translate your design, you need to understand what it can do and what its capabilities are, what its potential is, and most of all, what your limitations are. You need to understand when you need to use 3D and when you need to use 2D. You need to understand how you can efficiently create a 3D object that can give you a majority of your 2D work. Now, if you complete the whole project in 3D, feel free, but for the most part, you won't be completing it all in 3D. It'll probably be partially 2D, partially 3D. Even AutoCAD has 3D functionality, but I've yet to see too many designers or firms use the 3D capabilities of CAD, with the exception of the wall, window, and door features. So, until next time, my friends, this is Nation N.W. Jordan. And I wanted to thank you for supporting the show, for liking, commenting, and subscribing. Thanks for hitting that notification bell. Thanks for upvoting. Thanks for being a part of ArchNation. This is your nation, and I am signing out.